They are coming after women's rights to vote. And we need to make as much noise as possible because this is now heading to the Senate. And if this passes, we're cooked, we are shish kebabbed, we are on the grill.
A new TikTok conspiracy theory is going viral, and shocker, they don't have all the facts right. We're gonna break down more wild fake panic that's spreading over on TikTok, plus a truly bizarre segment from the BBC about a new Netflix show, and a socialist streamer who gave one of the most economically ignorant rants I've seen in some time. All this and so much more coming up on today's episode of the Brad vs. Everyone podcast, my daily show where we take on the craziest ideas from across the internet, our media, and our politics, all from an independent perspective. Up first, like I mentioned, another TikTok fake panic is spreading like wildfire. We've got a bunch of people up in arms over legislation that just passed the House of Representatives called the SAVE Act. It is election integrity legislation that is intended to require states and in the voting process to ensure that only citizens can vote. But according to massive TikTok influencers with millions of followers whose videos are going absolutely viral, it's banning women from voting basically and bringing about the Handmaid's Tale. I'm hardly even exaggerating. Take a listen to this little compilation I put together for you guys.
They are coming after women's rights to vote. And we need to make as much noise as possible because this is now heading to the Senate. And if this passes, we're cooked, we are shish kebabbed, we are on the grill, okay?
They've passed a bill to Senate that will make it harder for married women and marginalized groups to vote. Yay! We get to watch democracy die! Gather your documents, spread the word, because if this bill passes the Senate, I'm telling you right now, we will be watching the downfall of U.S. democracy. We will be witnessing voter suppression.
Do not disengage. The bill to take women's voting rights away is next week. The Heritage Foundation believes that men should have the vote for the household. So they are doing this under the guise of immigration election security, but that is why they are pushing this bill forward.
So the comments on these videos are even more unhinged than the original takes from these creators. At least some of the most popular comments are. This is how Handmaid's Tale legit started. Another said, "Are we evolving backwards?" That comment got 70,000 likes. Another person wrote, "Death doesn't scare me anymore at this point." Crying emoji, 12,000 likes. Are these people okay? Like, I think they need somebody to check in on them. Wow. Anyway, to the point. Ask yourself for a second. This idea. Republicans are just nonchalantly passing legislation that denies women, particularly married women, the right to vote. Does that sound correct? Does that sound true? Does that really sound like something that's happening? Or does it sound like hysteria, alarmism, the Lulu? I think your gut probably tells you the latter. And in this case, it's not always, but in this case, your gut is correct. I did a dive into this and investigated the legislation. And while I'm not sure how necessary the legislation actually is, there are some localities where they have added non-citizens to be eligible to vote, but non-citizen voting isn't a huge problem. But I mean, I'm supportive of things that can make people feel more confident in our election results, because I think that's a huge problem in and of itself, even if there's not an underlying huge problem of tons of non-citizens voting, because frankly, I don't think a lot of people will risk their immigration status or getting in trouble with the law just to cast a ballot that's individually not going to make any difference. But so even if non-citizen voting isn't a huge problem, it does exist, and the goal of this legislation is to make people feel more secure. And frankly, the idea that non-citizens shouldn't be voting, so you should have to provide some proof of your citizenship when you're registering to vote, is not crazy. It's somewhat intuitive and commonsensical, which is why several Democratic members of Congress voted for this bill, including a Democratic female lawmaker, Marie Gluesenkamp Perez, who sided with the GOP bill requiring proof of citizenship to vote. So did Maine Democrat Jared Golden, who wrote this in a statement. There are a lot of misleading claims out there about the SAVE Act. Let me set the record straight. I voted for the SAVE Act for the simple reason that American elections are for Americans. requiring proof of citizenship to register to vote is common sense. Some claim that requiring proof of citizenship is too onerous a burden, or that it will disenfranchise those whose names have changed for reasons like marriage. The truth is, the SAVE Act ensures name changes will not prevent anyone from registering to vote. The bill allows for several different ways to prove citizenship, but most importantly, it requires state leaders to establish protocols to allow citizens to register even if there are discrepancies in documents, such as name changes. So ask yourself, if this was really some dystopian bill meant to deny married women the right to vote, or trans people or non-binary people, that's another claim I've seen floating around, would you really have multiple Democrats voting for it, including a woman? Probably not. The congressman behind the legislation, Chip Roy, explained in more detail why he doesn't feel there is a real concern here about married women being able to vote. He told The Federalist, "The left has manufactured fake news claiming that women or anyone other than non-citizens will somehow be prevented from voting. Virtually every married individual will have zero impact because they are already registered to vote and their name is already documented." So despite the claims that you're seeing that millions of people are going to overnight lose access to the voter rolls, actually people who are already registered are fine, and it will impact future registration. And even then, there will be processes built in to account for people who have changed their names, because it is hard for women when they get married and change their name to go through all the steps and change all the paperwork. Can be very onerous. So some of them still have a birth certificate, for example, with their maiden name on it. There will be processes built in at the state level. They're letting them build them to do that and to handle that. They're not trying to take the right to vote away from married women. Come on, y'all. Come on. I know it's TikTok, but seriously? Chip Roy continued, "For the tiny fraction of women who have changed their name right before an election, the SAVE Act explicitly directs states to establish a process for individuals to register if there's a discrepancy in their documents, such as due to a name change." Guys, an interesting example that I found while just doing basic research about this topic was that the state of Arizona already requires proof of citizenship for state elections, and there have been no complaints about married women in Arizona being unable to vote suddenly. Not a thing. The very premise here is kind of absurd, that Republicans would seek to restrict the vote of married women, because guys, married women vote for Republicans. A majority of them do. But the data is very clear. When it comes to married women, 50% identify as Republicans or lean Republican, and only 45% identify as Democrats or lean Democrats. So that's of registered voters. Why would they want to disenfranchise their own voters? The narrative doesn't even make sense on its face, guys. It's just hysteria. Maybe this legislation isn't perfectly crafted. Maybe it should be more specific or spelled out or could have been amended. Maybe it's not truly necessary. Sorry, TikTok. It's not the start of the frickin' Handmaid's Tale. It's not some coordinated effort to deprive women of the right to vote. And y'all sound hysterical. Y'all sound delusional, and you're undercutting your own cause by constantly crying wolf, because it hurts your ability to raise the alarm when real bad things are happening. I've talked about some of them on this show that I don't agree with, but when you're constantly crying wolf, people stop running to your aid. How many times do we have to go through this before Democrats and progressive influencers finally learn that seemingly obvious lesson? I'm not sure that they ever will. That's my take. What do you guys think? Have you seen this hysteria about the SAVE Act online? It's been on my For You page for months. Now they're kind of worked up about it again because it passed the House and is going to the Senate. The funny thing is, it probably won't pass the Senate. You need 60 votes and they only have 53 Republicans. So unlikely 7 Democrats break and pass it, which one of two things could happen there. Either they do, in which case you know it's not some dystopian bill banning women from voting, or 7 Democrats wouldn't vote for it, or they don't and it doesn't become law. So no need to freak out regardless. The whole thing, kind of a silly saga, but that just makes it a day that ends in Y on TikTok. Okay, guys, before our next topic, thank you to everyone who sent in a voice note. I've loved going through them. I won't have a chance to respond to them all, but please do send in more personal stories, questions for advice, or questions about me that I can respond to on an upcoming episode. Just leave your first name. I'll keep you anonymous, but I may respond to yours on an upcoming bonus podcast. So the link will be in the description. And guys, I've got another big announcement. I'm launching a new podcast with my friend Colin Wright, who is a PhD and recovering academic who covers woke pseudoscience, where we will be going over the craziest academic papers from feminists who literally married shrimp and did a whole ceremony and wrote a paper about it that somehow got published, to the creepy academic who wants to argue that babies babies are all queer? Yeah, we're going to break all of this down in our new podcast, Citation Needed. It'll come out every Saturday. I will link to where you can sign up, or you can stay tuned for this Saturday for the episode to be released on YouTube. All right, up next, we're going to talk about probably the craziest BBC segment I've ever seen. The Conservative opposition leader, Kemi Badenoch, who is a right-of-center politician in UK politics, kind of an up-and-comer, the leader of the Conservative Party there. She went on the BBC. You've got one of the most important politicians in America, and they decided to frankly, like, harass her, not just ask her about it, not just bring it up, but harass her about this Netflix series, Adolescence, which is this British show that a 4-part series on Netflix. It's purely fictional, about a young boy who, spoiler alerts, gets kind of indoctrinated by like red pill alpha male ideology, and then tragically kills a young woman, one of his classmates. I watched it. I actually thought it was really good cinematically. Like, I thought it was an excellent piece of I guess TV, not film, but it's kind of feels more like a movie. I thought the message was fine. It talks about real problems of social isolation of young men, of kind of these fake gurus who mislead them. I mean, it is just fiction. It doesn't represent real events. It's not representative of real issues in the UK, because this kind of violence doesn't really happen. This incel violence is basically almost non-existent. And the real issue with knife crime in the UK is not 13-year-old boys who are like red pill or whatever. It's other groups and other situations. But regardless, I thought it was a really interesting, well-done show that talked about some topics, but I don't really understand getting angry at somebody because they haven't watched it. Yet that's what these BBC hosts did with Kemi Badenoch. Take a listen to this clip. It's really wild.
Have you watched Adolescence yet?
No, I haven't. I probably won't. It's a film on Netflix, and most of my time right now is spent visiting the country.
It's a 4-part series on Netflix, and everyone is talking about it. It is prompting conversations about toxic masculinity, smartphone use, young men feeling that they're being ignored, the idea of misogyny being increased in school. Why would you not want to know what people are talking about?
Well, I think that those are all important issues, and those were issues that I've been talking about for a long time. But in the same way that I don't need to watch Casualty to know what's going on in the NHS, I don't need to watch a specific Netflix drama to understand what's going on. It's a fictional series. It is not a documentary. What I've been talking about recently, for instance, is banning smartphones in schools. I've been going to schools all around the country. I was in Evesham just yesterday, talking to head teachers, talking to the students, and they talk about the problems that phones are causing.
The difference this documentary has made compared to, say, a politician, any politician, leader of a party, the Prime Minister, going around talking in schools, is this has made much more of an impact than any politician has in terms of what people are talking about right now. So it's really confusing that you don't want to know how this has made an impact, how parents are now saying we need to know more about smartphone use.
I can read what people are saying about it. I look at research. This is something that I've been looking at for a long time.
You want to know straight from the horse's mouth.
But telling me that I should go home and watch Netflix is you trying to tell me how to do my job. But I don't think that's how to do my job. I can read about that.
At what point did I tell you?
Well, you've just said that you were surprised that I haven't watched it. We don't have to watch a particular show to know what is going on in the country. I have met parents of children who've had those experiences. I have met children who've been victims. I think that is enough for me to go out there, make policy, look at the research. But I don't think the right thing is to be deciding who has watched which show and working out whether that means that you're informed. There are many ways for us to be informed.
Adolescence has made more of an impact than any politician has on parents and when it comes to the issue of smartphones and misogyny, and yet you are saying, despite that, you don't need to know about it.
No, I haven't said that I don't need to know about the issue.
You don't need to watch it.
I don't need to watch a specific show to know what is going on in this country. It's a fictional show.
Wow, so that was incredibly hostile and kind of unhinged. And I love how the BBC journalist who actually did watch it kept referring to Adolescence as a documentary, even though it's not. It's pure fiction. It's not based on a real story. It's not like a documentary. It's fiction. She's the one who has seen it and thinks it's so amazing, yet she's getting basic facts about it wrong. That Kemi Badenoch, who hasn't seen it, has those facts correctly. For understandable reasons, this exchange is blowing up on Twitter with people mocking it and criticizing the BBC for their bizarre behavior here. Spencer Clavin wrote, "The way this woman has to talk to her interviewers, it's like watching a grown-up gently explain to 2 toddlers that made-up stories aren't real. Astounding." Kat Rosenfield wrote, "This is like watching 2 hardcore 14-year-old boy band fans having a meltdown because their other, more bookish friend just said she didn't listen to the latest Backstreet Boys album." Kat, You're dating yourself there a little bit, my friend. Guy Benson wrote, I'd like to talk about the real life RAPE gangs. Them. It's a scandal that you haven't Netflixed and chilled to our favorite fictional show. WTF is wrong with you? Can't believe this is real. Well, guys, it is real, and it is absolutely insane. Political discourse and conversations shouldn't be entirely based or obsessed with fiction. Things that didn't happen and aren't representative of actual common knife crime or violence in the UK. Like, it's wild that we even have to say that. I would be so annoyed because of how hideously biased so much of their coverage is. If I was in the UK and I lived there and I had to pay their license fee or whatever, it's one thing to do like annoying left-wing media. It's quite another to force other people to pay for it as a public broadcaster. Yeah, that would be a hard pass from me if I were a Brit, but y'all have plenty of struggles going on over there. So far be it from me to tell you which ones to prioritize. And I'll just say this. How do these people not realize that the real issues covered in the show, cell phones, cyberbullying, masculinity, young men, male loneliness, all of this stuff is a real world problem in the sense that she's seeing it. She's literally going to schools. She's talking to parents whose kids have been bullied or victimized. Like, she's actually doing it, and these journalists are crashing out because she hasn't watched a Netflix show. It's bizarre. I'm honestly somewhat taken aback from it, but my expectations these days when it comes to mainstream journalism, they're really low. They're on the floor, basically. It's hard not to trip over them, but this one still stunned me, like how bad it was and how it's not even like if they just done the first 60 seconds of this, it would have been bad enough, but they kept going. Guys, I showed you a condensed, sped up clip of like a 5-minute thing. It is remarkable stuff. But Kemi Badenoch, obviously I'm sure I disagree with her on a whole host of issues. She's a cool operator. She's good at standing her ground and doesn't come off as aggressive or hostile, but is assertive and stands her own and just calmly makes them look like the crazy ones, because in this case, they are. All right, guys, up next, we're going to talk about Hasan Piker, because this socialist streamer just epically failed at basic economics. If you don't know him, Hasan is like this star of the internet. He's a massive Twitch streamer. He has a huge amount of fans. He's arguably one of the most influential people on all of social media, especially in the political realm. He also has no idea what he's talking about, is a full-fledged Marxist, and has a view of economics that is incoherent and absurd to the extreme, as made extremely clear by this bizarre clip of him rambling about free trade and why it's bad. Take a listen to this.
Dude, someone is messaging this appropriately. Holy shit. It's not mad. He's right. He's right. Democrats should not be in favor of free trade. Democrats should be the first to acknowledge that free trade is what has gutted the American manufacturing capabilities, destroyed the American labor force, destroyed the countryside. He's a good messenger on this. Bad take? Why is that a bad take? Free trade is nice. Without free trade, or with free trade, you have no manufacturing. Without manufacturing, you have no labor force. Without the labor force, you have no labor power. Without labor power, you have no way to Without labor power, you have no labor unions. Without labor unions, you have no way to increase wages. Without increasing your wages, you arrive at what America is doing currently, which is 23% underemployment, gig economy jobs galore, no protections whatsoever, no mechanism of pushback against the one party that's supposed to be against the right-wing reactionary forces, and you arrive at a nation with no healthcare, with no future, no retirement funds, a nation in disarray. All of it ties back to labor at the end of the day. Free trade is nice if you are not in the US, though. No, it's not. That's also incorrect. What are you talking about? Free trade is not nice. Do you believe the WTO narrative that free trade has actually greatly improved the living standards of all these other countries? No, obviously it has not. That is not the case at all. The one country that has actually been able to dramatically improve itself in that process is China, and that is not because of the free trade. That is because of what they did with the foreign capital that came in. The only thing that free trade benefits is capital owners. That's why America did it for so many years.
So this is insane, because basically everything he said is incorrect as a matter of like principle or theory or factually incorrect. For example, he talks about the decline of US manufacturing capabilities. There is no decline. There is a decline in employment in the manufacturing sector. We manufacture more today in the US than ever. I'll put the graph up on screen of total industrial production. You can see that it's much higher today than it was during the supposed glory days of manufacturing. We just employ fewer people in it, in part because of trade and those jobs going to where they can be done more cheaply, and other jobs happening here in the US instead, but honestly more so because of technology and automation. That's the real explanation behind this. But the US still does have a manufacturing factor that is robust, and trade restrictions often hurt manufacturing more than they actually help. A great example of this was Trump's first term steel tariffs. They helped the steel manufacturers, but they hurt all the other manufacturers who rely on the cost of steel as an input and had their costs go up. And the net effect was negative for manufacturing. There's ample research on this. So we're already wrong there. But then Hasan goes and says, without manufacturing, you don't have a labor force. What? Huh? You don't think people working in other fields instead still constitutes a labor force? You don't think people working in services? You don't think people working in construction? You think they're not a labor force just because they don't do manufacturing? It's bizarre. It doesn't make sense. Then he goes and says, and without a labor force, you don't have labor unions. Again, still have a labor force, even if they're not all manufacturing things. If they're doing other kinds of work, they're still laborers. And then he says, and if you don't have labor unions, strong labor unions, you don't have any way to raise wages. That's just not true. I mean, we have tons of entire industries where there are basically no unions, and people still increase their wages all the time in competitive free markets. And private sector unionization is near all-time lows in the United States. Yet wages for those workers, even adjusted for inflation, are much higher than they were decades ago in the pinnacle of the private union era. So I just don't know what he's rambling about. Basically, everything is factually incorrect at every turn, but this is one of the most influential people on the internet. Oh, and what he dismisses as the World Trade Organization narrative about free trade reducing global poverty isn't a narrative and isn't just the World Trade Organization. It is a fact that as free trade, directly because of this, has spread throughout the world, billions of people have been raised out of absolute poverty. It's just a fact. It's not like an opinion. It's not something you could argue that maybe there were other downsides that are worse, but you can't just say it didn't happen. The numbers are there. You can look at them. It's obviously true. And a huge part of the explanation for it is free trade. And that also applies to China. Hasan is also totally wrong about China. Yes, China had huge reductions in poverty, but they did that by making their economy less socialist, not more, by opening it up with market reforms and by doing more trade. I'll even show you this graph of China's trade and its poverty rate. You tell me. What's the correlation here? Oh, as trade goes up, their poverty rate goes down. So they did increase trade. He doesn't know what he's talking about again, or he does and he's just not being honest and doing propaganda. You tell me. But the really concerning thing about me for this kind of economic illiteracy is, to be honest with you, it's what I expect from socialists, from Marxists like Hasan. Although I am dismayed at how much influence they somehow have and how many followers they have that don't know their leaders are just wrong and incorrect about so many things. What actually bothers me more is that you hear MAGA people who, some on the protectionist right, basically sound like that. Basically sound like Hasan when it comes to trade, have the same kind of zero-sum, economically illiterate, innumerable, factually challenged view of trade and economics. And they're supposed to be the ones that get it. Republicans are supposed to be the ones that are better on economics and better for the economy. Some of them now basically agree with the socialists, with their dark and fact-free view of the global economy and how it works. That's even more concerning to me than Hasan Piker's content alone. But what do you guys think? Have you seen these kinds of takes elsewhere, not just from the socialists of the internet? Do let me know in the comments. Do hit that like button if you haven't yet. Please do consider subscribing as well. And that'll be it for today's episode. We'll talk again real soon.